Well, South Africa's COVID-19 response has got a $750 million boost as the World Bank Group Board of Executive Directors approved South Africa's request for a $750 development policy loan. Now, this loan will support South African government's efforts to accelerate its COVID-19 response. We're now joined by Dr. Duncan Pieterse, the head of Asset and Liability Management at National Treasury. Dr. Pieterse, thank you so much for joining us and a very warm welcome to The Full View.
Thanks, Mpiwe. Good evening.
I guess we need to take this loan with a pinch of salt and cautiously so, because I suppose, and I would imagine so many questions would be asked as to what will be the terms and conditions.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it is in the nature of World Bank development policy loans that they don't come with conditions other than, of course, the standard requirement to repay. And even in this instance, we've been given a 13-year period to repay, a 3-year grace period where no repayments are required, and then, of course, 10 years of paying the loan. That is in addition to the interest rate, which is highly concessional, makes this, of course, very attractive funding and helps us to reduce our debt service costs.
And I still ask again, Dr. Pieterse, what will the terms and conditions be? And will such terms and conditions be adverse to the country's fiscus?
Well, maybe I should just explain exactly how these development policy loans work. The way it works is that the World Bank would look at certain actions that the government has taken. In our case, they've looked at how we've responded to COVID in terms of the households that we've supported. They've looked at how we've responded in terms of how we've supported businesses. And they've also looked at, over the last year or so, the kind of reforms that we've implemented. In addition to that, they do an assessment of our macroeconomic policy. And then on the basis of actions that we've already taken, in the World Bank language, they call it prior actions. On the basis of these prior actions, they then allocate the funding. So there are no real conditions other than a country needs to be in good macroeconomic standing. It needs to have taken certain actions that would enhance its future economic growth prospects, and also it needs to have taken certain actions in response to COVID. And on the basis of those prior actions that we've taken, we were then able to qualify for this loan.
Well, this loan will also, I suppose, reinforce the decisions on how best to provide relief to the economy and those worst affected by the health crisis. This is just one facet of the fiscal constraints that the country is facing. How can, a relief of this magnitude be provided then?
Well, I think what's clear is that, look, at the time of the medium-term budget last year, we indicated that we are going to be diversifying our sources of funding. We are going to, in addition to the funding we raise from the markets, we are also going to approach development finance institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, because these institutions allow us to lower the cost of our funding. The decisions around what the government spends the money on remains our decision. This funding is not earmarked for anything in particular. And of course, any decisions around the policy objectives that we pursue remain the decision of the government. And of course, more details around exactly what is contained in the budget for next year will be announced later in February.
Will it also cushion the economic hardships that has been faced by South Africans, those in particular between the age groups of 18 to 59 years? Put simply, will this help towards, extending the 350 Rand social relief of a distress grant?
Well, as I said earlier, what this loan does is it recognizes prior actions. So it recognizes the actions that we have already taken in order to support households through, for example, the 350 grant. If there are any announcements by the government for an extension of the 350 grant, for example, that will be announced at the time of the budget. And this loan really has no bearing on that decision, which is a decision that the government needs to take.
Okay, Dr. Pieterse, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.